This time, Africa. From Antwerp, Belgium to Paris, through France and Spain to the Straits of Gibraltar, and then down across the vast continent of Africa to the Indian Ocean. We had received the necessary permits from the British, French, and Belgian governments. We were awaiting in Antwerp the arrival of our trucks by freighter from New York. For 18 months, these trucks were to be our living quarters. Loaded with supplies, they weighed 6 tons apiece. A few hours later, we had the honor of being received in the Royal Palace in Brussels by the King and Queen of Belgium. King Leopold, himself a keen photographer, minutely inspected our trucks, and especially our photographic equipment. Queen Astrid talked graciously to Mrs. Dennis. Little we knew that barely a few weeks later, we were to hear in the center of Africa the tragic news of Queen Astrid's death. The hour of our official departure had come. The last interviews were given, the last photographs taken, and we were on our way. The Place de la Concorde in Paris, gray on this February morning, bitter cold on the windswept mountains of Spain. And now, that famous rock of Gibraltar faced us across the bay. We were on the docks of Algeciras, and again our trucks swung from fragile-looking cables for the short crossing of the straits, which would take us to Spanish Morocco. A week after leaving Brussels, we were on African soil. Ceuta, where we land, has modern docks and a modern ramp to lead into the ancient city. But soon we strike inland and enter another world. We are approaching the sacred city of Moulay Idris. It is the time of the Grand Musim, a famous yearly Mohammedan festival. The wealthy Arabs have come on magnificent Arabian horses. Pilgrims flock into the city in thousands. And already, the fantasias have begun. See them go, the finest horses and the finest horsemen in the world. Entertainers have come to the city from all over Morocco. The solemn fire dancers who hold burning coals in their hands and produce lighted torches from their flowing sleeves. The fire eaters who breathe in flames and smoke and assure the credulous pilgrims that fire is their only diet. And see this fellow. He is only breaking bottles. But wait. He does not break them as you and I. This is the bed he is making. He is very tired and wants to take a beauty rest now. And see this one. He is not tired, but hungry. No fire for him. Nothing will satisfy him but well-blended broken bottle. What an idea for a breakfast food. And here is a snake charmer as daring as those of India. This is the African black cobra, as vicious and as deadly as the Indian cobras. Drums and flute provide the hypnotic music. Barrier of mountains separates the fertile plains of Morocco from the barren wastes of the Sahara Desert. Here in Africa are huge cedars and pines and often heavy snow. We had left Europe in winter and had had bitterly cold nights in the mountains of Spain. We were back again in snow and ice, and in our first camp in the Atlas, the water in our radiators froze and we had to chip ice off the windshield. Africa is a country of contrasts. Look at this hooded figure, passing in a setting so unfamiliar. Look at the telephone lines, for we are still on a thoroughly modern road, the military road across the Atlas Mountains, superbly engineered and built by the French Foreign Legion for the opening up of France's huge African empire. Away once more, we are now swiftly going down the southern side of the mountain range. We learn to appreciate good hydraulic brakes on roads like these. In less than 4 hours, we will pass from a temperature well below freezing to the almost intolerable heat of the desert. At 6 in the morning, we were struggling in snow and ice. At 11, we were in the Zeist Valley, and the temperature has reached 110. Reject from your minds all you ever heard about the Sahara being just one huge ocean of sand. There is in the Sahara every kind of barren and forbidding landscape. Huge rocky cliffs, mountain ranges, tumbled masses of rock. In the deepest valleys along its northern as well as its southern edge lie the oases, graceful palms, the vivid green of which contrasts almost violently with the orange red of the sand dunes and the deep blue of the sky. For several hundreds of miles before we enter the absolutely barren desert, they will dot our course, and rough tracks, hard on tires, but easy enough going for our powerful dodges, connect them with civilization. The sands are never still. The slightest breeze lifts and carries a fine golden powder, which comes rippling down the sides of the dunes, and slowly in the course of centuries alters their outline. Old Saharians tell you, the dunes are smoky, and they refer to land which the wind is blowing off the top of the dunes. Too often, the forerunner of terrifying and disastrous sandstorms. In every one of these oasis outposts, the French have a garrison of colonial troops. It is a marvelous sight to see men galloping by in their brilliant uniforms, mounted on Arabian horses especially trained to the soft sand of the desert. The officers are the finest men of the French army, inured as hard as their men to the long marches under a burning sun and to the thirst of the desert. It is not many years since the desert was infested with lawless bands of Tuareg villagers, and these lonely outposts were in constant danger of attack. This very one stood a heroic and bloody siege. Discipline as strict as that of the finest cavalry schools of Europe prevails here, many hundreds of miles from France, among these hard-bitten desert men. And now we are leaving the last of the roads behind us. Before us stretches the desert, hundreds of miles of sand and gravel, sometimes firm and smooth so that we can make good time, sometimes perfectly hard under a thin covering of soft sand, sometimes soft and without bottom under a thin, hard crust, which suddenly gives way under the wheels. There is in the Sahara every kind of sand, and weeks of experience will not teach you where a surface, which is to all appearances hard, will unexpectedly give way. The vivid, rotten earth is the worst, as fluid and slippery as talcum powder. Sometimes as we shoveled and sweated, a camel caravan would pass, and how scornfully the camels would look at us. They had no 6-ton load to carry, however, and no 4-ton trailer to pull. We had been many times assured that the attempt to pull a 4-ton trailer across the Sahara was lunacy, and I came close to believing it. With their terrible overload, the Dodge trucks took almost unbelievable punishment. Remember that they did this day after day for hundreds of miles in a temperature of 120 to 130 degrees. Our progress was at times dishearteningly slow. On our worst day, we did like this in 12 hours, less than 100 yards. And then, sometimes when we least expected it, the wheels would suddenly bite, pull out. We would change into second, into high, creep up to 35, 40. The secret of Sahara driving is at all costs to keep up speed on tires deflated to less than half normal. We were now picking up our supplies for the second leg of the trip. From now on, we were to give up our comfortable Pullman installations in the trucks. The trailer discarded, we were filling the trucks to the roof with cases of gasoline, long ago sent here for us by camel caravan. Every item was to be checked over and over. Food and water for 20 days, 300 gallons of water. The greater part of the desert still lay before us. But we felt we were veterans of the Sahara and that nothing would stop us. 1.25 tons of gasoline in each truck. From now on, we would sleep on the ground. We'd given the little boys cigarettes and pennies, and they hated to see us go. But the town was preparing to give us a send-off in the manner of the Sahara. As we drove, the crowd around us grew, and soon the sand and gravel kicked up with the flying hoofs of the horses made me fear for our windshields. In the heavy sand, we tried vainly to overtake the furiously galloping horses. Again alone. Truck number 2 was freed at last from its heavy trailer. The motors hummed cheerfully. The road was straight, level, and without turnings. Traffic was too scarce to bother us. No speed limit and no tops. All along the Niger River is a meeting place of the north and the south, a mixture of races, costumes, and tongues. The Negro from the south meets with the Arab of the north. The nomadic Kuls, Schlurs, Tuaregs of the desert. All sorts of wares and objects of odd shapes change hands in these markets. Now, doesn't he look like a tough guy from the desert and a shrewd bargainer? Did you notice the padlock in the lady's nose? Placed there, perhaps, to keep her nose out of other people's business. But here is a local chieftain reviewing his warriors. He took these men of his to France during the World War to fight for the French, and he wears the cross of the Legion of Honor on his desert robes. And here is the influence of the Crusades, which I had heard about as being still strong in this region. The saddles on these horses, the quilted robes which they wear, the gorgeous headdresses of the men. All these are directly descended from the Crusaders, an unchanged tradition since the Middle Ages. We push on again and cross the whole of French Congo, and at last have reached Bangassou on the Bangu River, and on the border of Belgian Congo. Rivers are now our main obstacle. We cross them on native ferries, a precarious platform of logs on native dugout canoes, each hewed out of a single tree trunk. But these ferries were never made for 6 tons, and each one has to be strengthened before we can dare attempt the crossing. Altogether on the trip, we made 80 crossings of rivers, and we crushed and splintered many a dugout canoe, but we only foundered 3 times. We are now in the great Congo forest, and rapidly approaching the equator. Precarious bridges across torrents and ravines are a constant anxiety to us. We get out of the car, examine the bridge, find that the logs have rotted or been eaten away by termites, and we decide the bridge is thoroughly unsafe, and then we cross. In the remote villages in the forest, life goes on as it has for centuries. After a few hours, our presence ceases to disturb, and we can watch the placid communal life of the village. The women are always at work. Here they are shelling beans, a staple of the local diet. The men do the hunting or the fishing. These people live almost entirely on frogs, or rather on tadpoles, which are caught in traps made of local reeds and vines. Outside every fisherman's hut, the day's catch is set to dry in the sun. Tadpoles hold all the vitamins in the world. The most powerful and good-looking fellows we saw in Africa were invariably men who lived on fish or tadpoles. These, well dried and crisp, and an occasional full-grown frog, will make a delectable meal. The barbershop is conveniently located on Main Street. A special study will be made of your profile to choose the style of hairdress which suits your type best. The hair is deposited in a neat little pile. And this is Congo's own soapless shave. No brush, no lather, and the closest shave you ever had in your life. Different styles prevail, not only in hairdress, but in the elaborate patterns tattooed by cutting the skin of the face and of the body. Many of these patterns are tribal in character and indicate the tribe and even the village of the owner of the tattooing. But there is room for a lot of individual fancy and the exercise of personal taste. Notice that his teeth have been carefully filed to a point and the two front teeth knocked out. She was camera shy and strongly objected to our taking her picture. Our arrival in the village was usually the occasion for general rejoicing. The drums would be quickly set up. Everyone would run into his hut and return with their most elaborate costumes. By this time, the orchestra has appropriated the platform on the sedan. He is an individualist, breaking all tradition with this solo dance on his knees. Well, at least one member of the audience thinks well of it. We were now in country where game was plentiful, but it was seldom that we could, unobserved, come close enough to game for photography. This busy warthog, however, apparently had not heard us coming. We reached the Congo River, which we had planned to cross. On its far side was utterly uninhabited country, said to be a wild animal paradise. But the river, when we reached it, proved to be impossible to cross. Below us, on the sandbanks on the edge of the river, a veritable herd of hippos was asleep. The honking of the horn rudely awakened them and sent them rushing in momentary panic to the water. We borrowed a dugout canoe from the natives and fitted it with the outboard motor we had brought with us. And in this somewhat strange vessel, we explored the river further. We lost ourselves in tributaries of the Congo and saw many more hippos and a great many crocodiles. But no transportation for the trucks across the river was to be found, and nowhere could we find a fjord where we could hope that the trucks would get through under their own power without swamping the motors. I was still anxious to get some pictures of crocodiles on land, but even with the motor stopped and the men paddling cautiously, we never could get nearer than 100 feet without their waking up and dashing for the water. At last we saw one who seemed unaware of us. I signaled to the men to paddle straight towards him. They did, and when he suddenly woke up and started for the water, he nearly leaped into the boat with us. There was decidedly no chance of crossing the river under our own power. The bottom everywhere was treacherous and muddy, and the water, after unexpected rains, was too high. We had sent for the elephants whom we had seen at work on the edge of the forest. we planned to abandon the sedan temporarily and to use elephants to take the 2 trucks across the river into the game country. We have been faced with turning back, or going up steep 60-degree grades like this, overloaded, dripping with muddy river water. There they go, up and over. I expected a high grass belt of a few miles along the river, but we could cut our way through this way for the better part of a day. However, we were in game country all right, and the first sight that greeted us when we came out was truly magnificent. He was an old solitary bull elephant, and the biggest one I have ever seen with good, well-curved tusks. The sight of him gave promise of good country, and we decided to stay right there. Our plan was to build a platform well concealed in a tree, and for this purpose we had brought with us the necessary rails and boards, rope ladders and pulleys. We had cots and blankets, batteries for electric light, cooking equipment and supplies, even books to while away the hours. And I planned to live in the tree until the animals would lose their fear of us. The view from our treetop home was one of breathtaking beauty. Herds of topee were our first visitors. Then elephants came out of the woods. And then a rare sight on land, a hippo, far from water, unless his home was in some undiscovered lake nearer to us than the river. Buffalo under the shade of euphorbias. An endless variety of antelope, calm, graceful, and timid. The proud and majestic water buck, perhaps the most beautiful of the antelopes. Warthogs, the little flags at the end of their tails as a signal to each other, would run past. In a nearby tree, which seemed to produce succulent fruit, a whole tribe of baboons would feed and chatter all day, breaking the silence of the jungle with their vulgar noise and their loud barking. We hoped to see cheetah, or at least some of the big cats, and every day we placed fresh meat as bait under our trees. At last, and the most unexpected, a leopard, so rare a sight in daylight that this picture is perhaps unique. Every one of the animals of the jungle seemed to sense his presence. The antelopes moved restlessly. The clicking of the camera made the leopard uneasy. His snarling startled the baboons, and they started wildly chattering to pour from the tree. But the noisy baboons had started a general alarm. Did you think a hippo could not run? The leopard himself became uneasy at the general alarm. At once the vulture swooped down for the leavings. And again, against its backdrop of brooding mountains, the stage is deserted.